Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 63 of Diehlman at Halftime, the NBA podcast that tops all others. I'm your host, Larry Diehlman. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome aboard, and if you've been a loyal listener, welcome back. We have much to get to today and not a lot of time to do it. We have 5 sections that we'll get into: a general overview of the NBA this week, and our usual highlight, lowlight, random stat, and game of the week. Let's get to our content for the week. Don't you just love when refs interfere with the outcomes of games, or at least you think so in your biased opinion? Game 4 of Pistons-Knicks on Sunday was a great example. New York was up by 1 point in the final seconds. Josh Hart clearly fouled Detroit's Tim Hardaway Jr. on a 3-point shot, but the refs kept their whistles silent. The Knicks won 94-93 to take a 3-1 series lead heading back to Madison Square Garden. Crew chief David Guthrie later admitted that a foul should have been called. This would have given Hardaway Jr. 3 free throws to potentially win the game and tie the series 2-2. Guthrie called Hart's contact with Hardaway Jr., quote, more than marginal. Go watch the replay if you haven't. Hart was smothering Hardaway Jr. These are calls that affect the playoffs. I'm not saying every call is going to be perfect, but the Pistons maybe being tied instead of down 3-1 is huge. We'll see if Detroit can rally back from this missed call or if their season is all but over. Some of the NBA awards have begun to drop. Cleveland Cavaliers center Evan Mobley was announced as the league's Defensive Player of the Year. Boston Celtics guard Peyton Pritchard took home 6th Man of the Year. Mobley is the first player in Cavaliers history to claim the honor. He beat Dyson Daniels of Atlanta and Draymond Green of Golden State for the award, taking 35 first-place votes. Cleveland has a small dilemma because of Mobley's contract. One of the incentives of his rookie contract extension signed last year included a $45 million increase if he won Defensive Player of the Year. His rookie extension across the next 5 years now goes from $224 million to $269 million. Meanwhile, Pritchard has had a career year off Boston's bench, averaging 14.3 points on 47.2% shooting in 28.4 minutes per game. Beating Malik Beasley of Detroit and Ty Jerome from Cleveland, Pritchard earned a whopping 82 first-place votes. The Cavaliers and Celtics are the top 2 seeds in the East, respectively. This episode is entitled From the Victor's Perspective. So, who's raising eyebrows at the moment? Let's go to our highlight, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cruising through a playoff series is always a nice feeling, especially if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers are up 3-0 in their first-round series against the Miami Heat. Having home court advantage is a great benefit of being a top seed, but don't forget about the fact that you face weaker opponents early on. Cleveland has run away from the rest of the league all year, and it's translating well in late April. Star guard Donovan Mitchell has averaged 24.3 points, 4.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and 1.7 steals so far this postseason. Evan Mobley, the newly crowned Defensive Player of the Year, mans the paint with 16 points and 6.3 rebounds per game this series. Heck, Ty Jerome, who was a 6th Man of the Year runner-up, had 13 points and 11 assists in 22 minutes in Game 3. 2 of the 3 Cleveland-Miami games have been blowouts of at least 20 points, and Cleveland has dropped at least 121 points in every contest. Still recovering from the Jimmy Butler deal, Miami just doesn't seem to have any firepower to match Cleveland. See you in the conference semifinals, Cavaliers. Their next game is tonight, Monday, April 28th at 7:30 in Miami, as they aim to finish off the Heat. Let's go to our lowlight, the Milwaukee Bucks. There are 2 kinds of teams in the NBA postseason. teams attempting to assert dominance, and teams looking to not fall short of expectations. The Milwaukee Bucks are in the latter. The Bucks are down 3-1 in their series with the Indiana Pacers. Milwaukee fans may be experiencing deja vu considering that the Bucks lost to the Pacers in the first round last year. The series isn't over yet, but someone needs to steer the ship instead of allowing it to crash into the iceberg. On Friday, superstar Giannis Antetokounmpo just won his first playoff game since 2022 when healthy. Reminder, it's 2025. Then again, it doesn't help when he's averaging 33.8 points, 14.3 rebounds, and 5 assists per game in the series and losing. Kyle Kuzma and Taurean Prince dropping goose eggs in Game 1 and Brook Lopez in Game 3 won't help any team, let alone Milwaukee. As we mentioned last week, Damian Lillard amazingly returned to the court for Game 2 from deep vein thrombosis. He's been struggling in his first games back. However, in Game 4, he suffered a torn Achilles. If Milwaukee loses in the first round for the third straight year, the offseason might get uncomfortable. Game 5 of this series will be tomorrow, Tuesday, April 29th at 6 o'clock, back in Indiana. To get more insight into our Lowlight this week, we have our 14th guest on Diehlman at Halftime Season 2. Let's get into it. So for our 14th guest of Season 2 on the Diehlman at Halftime podcast, we welcome Noah Levick. Noah is a Philadelphia 76ers writer for NBC Sports Philadelphia. He's been at NBC Sports Philadelphia for about 7.5 years, and he's also served as a writer and web producer there. Additionally, Noah was a freelance writer for the Portland Press Herald. Noah is a 2017 graduate of Bates College. Noah, how are we doing today?
Doing all right, doing all right. Appreciate you having me on.
It's good to have you on. So, Noah, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Milwaukee Bucks. We are now in the NBA playoffs first round. The Bucks are facing an 0-2 hole against the Indiana Pacers. So, up first, the Giannis Antetokounmpo trade rumors have already started, like they usually do. Despite winning a championship a few years back, Giannis, when healthy, hasn't won a playoff game since 2022. By the way, it's 2025. If you're a Bucks fan, is it panic time?
I think there's a lot of valid reasons for concern. I do still think they're a very talented team. I'd be surprised if they're swept in this series, but it's an uphill battle at this point. It's really challenging if you fall down 0-2 in the NBA playoffs. But just looking at Milwaukee's season and how they got here, I would say there are glimmers of hope in the fact that they started 1-6 and they recovered to win 48 games. And also, the home road splits are pretty stark, 27-14 at home, 20-20 on the road. So I think there's a decent chance if you're a Bucks fan that you can see a route here to winning the next two games and at least evening this series up and having a chance. But I'd say overall, it doesn't look like a super pleasant situation for Milwaukee here. I think it'll be a struggle to win this series. And despite Giannis having pretty incredible production as usual, there's a good chance that this is again a first round exit for this Bucks team, just on paper, how things stand right now.
It's been tough for Milwaukee. They lost in the first round last year to Indiana, so losing to them 2 years in a row would definitely be a bummer for them. And it's not been an easy ride for Milwaukee ever since that championship. Giannis has been injured recently. Then there was that embarrassing loss to the Miami Heat a few years ago as an 8 seed. The Heat were an 8 seed. They barely made it out of the play-in tournament and took down the Bucks as a number 1 seed, and that was definitely a stain in their franchise history in terms of playoffs. But I think right now, Giannis putting up these good numbers and not getting results, it kind of reminds you of what the Denver Nuggets have been doing. Jokic can drop 60-point triple-doubles and they maybe win by a point or they lose by 5. So I think it's been a struggle and they just have not been putting some good pieces around Giannis. So next, how would you assess Damian Lillard's fit in Milwaukee during his tenure? He's still putting up numbers, but the Bucks are struggling to get anywhere. Drew Holiday, who Lillard replaced, became an instant champion by going to Boston. Now, obviously, Boston and Milwaukee, two different teams entirely, but Drew Holiday fit in perfectly with the Celtics. So, how do you assess this whole Damian Lillard in Milwaukee thing?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, like when Milwaukee got Lillard, I did have concerns about the injury risk. And at the time, it seemed like the main problem there was this abdominal injury that he had lingering and had pop up a couple of times. I don't think anyone could have predicted he'd have deep vein thrombosis in his calf this season. Pretty rare and unfortunate injury. And as you laid out too, Giannis has had some bad injury luck these past couple of years as well. Didn't play at all in that first round playoff series loss to Indy last year. So I do think it's hard to assess when you don't have the two stars healthy on the floor very much for the high stakes games and the reason that you made the pair in the first place. I do think everything points to him still being incredible offensive player, and we've known for a long time that he's below average defensively. And also that it's just a giant drop off from Holiday. Like I think that has been really glaring. And I think in this Indy series, you do see a lot of Milwaukee's flaws defensively. Like they ranked 16th in the NBA in defensive rating outside of garbage time. And right now, they certainly look like a below average defensive team, and Lillard seems to be a strong representation of that. But like it is tough despite like the obvious flaws with Lillard as a player and on this Bucks team fit wise, to be ultra critical when there's just been such limited availability of the two stars. So for me, that's where I have a hard time like making a definitive judgment that it's absolutely a failure or what have you, just because I think star injuries tend to loom so large in the NBA and the Bucks have unfortunately been hit really hard on that front the last couple of years. But yeah, like just being candid for me, when Lillard was acquired, I did think, man, like the injuries could be a real problem there, and that has indeed how it's played out. We'll see, whether they can pull off some sort of turnaround in this series, whether Lillard can get his rhythm and flow back now that he is back on the court after, returning from the deep vein thrombosis. But as we said, that looks like a pretty tough battle. And I do think there are many reasons to be critical of the roster construction around Giannis and Lillard is one aspect of that in my mind.
Yeah, this whole thing, when they acquired Lillard last year, it was finally, oh, he's getting away from the Blazers, and maybe now they can be a title contender. But like you said, it's just been an odd fit, and the defensive holes on the Bucks has been glaring. Obviously, Drew Holiday is not somebody that's going to go give you 25 points and 10 assists every night, but he just is so good defensively that that's why the Celtics are the way that they are. Lillard, he's not going to wow you in terms of defense, but next to Giannis, yes, the scoring is there, but the defensive side is killing them. And we'll see how this turns out in the next few years as Lillard and even Giannis as they start to age. But as of right now, it's just kind of an odd fit. So we'll have to see what happens there. So next, what are your thoughts on the Kyle Kuzma Chris Middleton swap at the trade deadline? Did you see that as a win now move? Did it feel like the right time to trade an aging Middleton? I looked at it like, okay, not going to move the needle necessarily. Kyle Kuzma's a scorer, doesn't do a lot else. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it did feel like the right time to move Chris Middleton to me. Again, just like the injury history had become pretty lengthy over the last couple years in his mid 30s. Like a great, great player when healthy, but he can't really stay healthy anymore. But the fact that he was traded for Kyle Kuzma was a little bit puzzling to me. And I think Kuzma, in some circles, is viewed quite negatively. I think there are certainly positive aspects of his game. Like he's got good size, he can score the ball. I think when he's locked in, he can be a, helpful multi-position defender. But I think like some of the reputation of being a little bit spacey out there and not always being a guy you can rely upon, it is pretty valid. And he's not done so well to start this series. Had a scoreless game one. He has 3 rebounds through 2 games. He's 0 for 5 from 3-point range. I think that's been a real negative element of it, that he's just a below average 3-point shooter and again has yet to hit a three in the playoffs. So yeah, I think giving up Chris Middleton and looking for someone younger that you knew would be on the floor, that made sense. But the player they acquired being Kyle Kuzma, there was always some risk to that, just given his style of play. And I do think it's not going so well. So they'll hope to see a better version of Kuzma. But yeah, that was my gut feel reaction to the trade was, I think, on board with parting with Chris Middleton, but did have some questions about Kyle Kuzma as a Milwaukee Buck and wasn't so sold, I think, on the notion that a change of scenery would result in a better version of Kuzma. I think some of that has indeed played out in not a great way thus far for Milwaukee, but we'll see what Kuzma brings to the table the rest of this series.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about the injury history. It comes to a point where, what is he bringing to the table if he's not going to be healthy? There's always the saying, availability is the best ability. And as people that live in the Philly area, we know that all too well with Joel Embiid, for example. So I think getting rid of Middleton was the correct move at this time. I feel bad that he went to the Wizards of all teams, but Kyle Kuzma, I mean, he is an NBA champion. As much as people laugh at him, he is an NBA champion in however you want to view the bubble ring, and we'll see if he can contribute in a good way for the Bucks. Maybe they get out of the first round, maybe they get swept, gentlemen swept, who knows, but we will see if Kyle Kuzma can replace Middleton in more ways than one. So to wrap things up, head coach Doc Rivers recently stated that it's unfair to criticize him for blowing the most 3-1 playoff leads in NBA history. Quote, I don't get enough credit for getting the 3 wins. Yes, that is a real quote. Are we witnessing another classic Doc Rivers playoff collapse? What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, I did cover Doc Rivers during his tenure in Philadelphia, and he did have a knack for those sorts of quotes where you had to read it over a second time to make sure it was authentic, and definitely isn't shy about defending himself when people are critical of his history. He'll point to all the good work that was done to build a series lead or what have you. I think this one wouldn't strike me as a collapse. Obviously, they have yet to win a game in this series, yet alone earn a series lead. I do think it would be very disappointing to lose in the first round, 2 years in a row to the same ball club. And, I'm sure Doc Rivers will point out, this is his first full year since taking over from Adrian Griffin. And it's been difficult to build chemistry and continuity because of the injuries to his stars. He's a coach that will let you know about all of those challenges. So yeah, I think collapse would maybe not strike me as the most fair criticism, but I think certainly if his team were to lose again in the first round, there would be plenty of people nitpicking his work and the fact that they've remained a pretty below average defensive team and haven't really been able to click, on all cylinders. And I think, Doc Rivers would have to, again, respond to some of those criticisms. But yeah, he's definitely an interesting coach to cover in that he will not be stoic if faced with any sort of questions about the work he's done. He will be adamant and proud about defending himself, regardless of the circumstances, which is entertaining for us in the media biz.
When I said collapse, and maybe I just didn't clarify this, when I meant collapse, it was more so underachieving. I'm
Yeah.
not saying they're up 3-1 right now and LOL, they just blew another one, but collapse as in they should be getting out of the first round. Why are they underachieving? That kind of thing. But I do get what you're saying. So it is pretty funny how, looking at these quotes and like, wait a minute, is this the NBA Centel account on Twitter with the fake quotes? So definitely not a good part of Doc Rivers' coaching history with the blown 3-1 leads. But I do think that they have to at least get out of the first round to make any sort of a successful season this year. But if they lose in the first round again to Indiana, as of this recording, it is only a 2-0 Indy lead. If they don't get out of the first round, then I think it is going to be a very long off season, and a lot of questions, especially around Giannis, will come to light. So, Noah, thank you for appearing on Diehlman at halftime, and hopefully we can get you back on in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again for having me on. Appreciate it.
let's go over to our random stat. We're not out of the first round yet, and someone's already embarrassing themselves. On Thursday, the Memphis Grizzlies blew the second largest lead in NBA playoff history. Well, tied for second. The Seattle Supersonics, now the Oklahoma City Thunder, blew a 29-point advantage against the LA Lakers in 1989. Back to the present. At home in Game 3 against the Oklahoma City Thunder, hello again, Memphis led 69-40, a 29-point lead in the second quarter. The Thunder won 114-108, a 74-39 turnaround. The biggest collapse was in 2019 when the LA Clippers beat the Warriors after Golden State conceded a 31-point lead. Remember, that game had a healthy Warriors team of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green. What didn't help in the Grizzlies-Thunder game was the fact that Ja Morant went down with a hip injury and was later seen in crutches. The Grizzlies were up 27 at that point. After Memphis suffered 2 beatdowns in games 1 and 2, it's crazy that the Thunder were in this hole to begin with. One could argue this series might be 3-1 or even 2-2 instead of being over in a sweep if Morant hadn't got hurt, or maybe not. However, this can be a good lesson in adversity for Oklahoma City as they go further in the playoffs. Finally, let's go to Game of the Week. For this week's Game of the Week, let's do the LA Clippers at Denver Nuggets. This first round Game 5 is tomorrow, Tuesday, April 29th at 10 o'clock. The Clippers and Nuggets are tied 2-2, and this is arguably the best series of the first round. As the kids say these days, it's a movie. With the exception of Game 3, each game has been decided by 3 or less points. LA had a chance to go up 3-1 going back to Denver had it not been for Denver's Aaron Gordon hitting a game-winning, buzzer-beating putback dunk. He threw down a dunk after Nikola Jokic's step-back three-pointer was off target. Even in slow-motion replay, the game was so close to being sent to overtime. Either the Nuggets win and will have a chance to win the series on the road, or the Clippers take it and will look to close the series out at home. Jokic versus Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. Fasten your seatbelts twice. Give me the Clippers 103-93. Well, that's all the time we have for today. If you haven't already, make sure to follow me on social media. I have 2 X or Twitter accounts and 2 Instagram accounts. The podcast accounts are under @Diehlman_NBA for both X and Instagram. My personal X account is @LarryDiehlman18, and my personal Instagram is @Mr_Sports18. They're also in the description on Buzzsprout, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you to Noah Levick for being our guest this week on the podcast. Remember, you can follow him on X and Instagram @Noah Levick. And don't forget to spread the word about Diehlman at halftime. See you next time, fellow Hoops fans.